I'm author and critic David Agranoff. I'm a horror and science fiction author, critic, and researcher. In this podcast, I wanted to provide in-depth interviews and panel discussions with everyone from New York Times bestselling authors to researchers, musicians, and anyone I find interesting. Welcome to Postcards from a Dying World.
Right. Hey, welcome back to Postcards from a Dying World. Guess what? I've been on hiatus for a long time. And there's a couple reasons for that. And you may want to know, like, hey, and I've had a couple of you really screaming at me to get back to the Science Fiction Hall of Fame series. And I promise you, I am. I've been waiting for Brian Evanson to get back in the country so he can join me for the Cordwainer Smith episode. Has been part of it. He spent 6 months being a writer in residency in Berlin. Tough life. But he's back now. And so hopefully soon we'll be doing that. So the Science Fiction Hall of Fame series will be back, and I will get back into that. Also, coming up, the next episode will be a part of the Unproduced Screenplay series. And we'll be covering Shane Black and Fred Decker's 1988 script that was almost John Carpenter's follow-up to They Live, Shadow Company. But it didn't happen. It was supposed to be the reunion of John Carpenter and Kurt Russell. But if you want to hear about that, you're going to have to come back and for the next episode, and we'll be breaking it down. It is a really cool screenplay, and it is too bad that movie did not happen. However, so I apologize that I've been away, but a couple things happened. In the meantime, is I wrote the sequel to The Last Night to Kill Nazis, which is done, and I'm proud to say my editor told me that he was shocked and impressed at how good it was. Even though he, I think, expected a good book, but he told me he was consistently blown away by it. So hopefully that means it's really good. But I worked so hard on that book, I pretty much shut everything else out for a couple months. And so that meant none of these podcasts, and I'm sorry about that. But the other thing that made the timing tough on the podcast was this here book came out. Too. So Keith and I were finishing that. So, as I always do on my podcast, I do an episode on my own book because why the hell not? It's my podcast and I can do that. And I turn the tables over to somebody else to interview me. And in this case, I have two special guests. One, David Hyde out of Colorado, better known to the dickheads as Lord Running Clam. LRC has been studying PKD for a long goddamn time. And so, LRC, can you give people a brief thumbnail of how you started with how long you've been reading PKD?
Okay, David. What happened was I was working in a factory in Indiana back in 1984, and I found a book. It was a paperback copy of Eye in the Skyline Around, and I was working the second shift. I picked it up, started reading it, took it home at midnight, read on into the night till I finished it, and it just blew my mind. And after that, I just went on to I went on to reading everything I could find by Philip K. Dick, and Davey's holding up my book Pink Beam.
Yeah,
that came
including
out of
this book, The Pink Beam Companion, which is a detailed timeline of Philip K. Dick's life. So he's one of the biggest dickheads on the planet, one of the biggest PKD experts, and for that reason, his take on my book was really important to me, as we'll get to. So we'll get back to you, LRC, in a little bit, but I think that's a great thumbnail introduction. This guy has forgotten more about PKD than most people know. So he's one of the all-time experts. Whenever I want to find out what date Philip K. Dick wrote what particular book, I go to him immediately. And one thing you'll notice, we were geeking out ahead of time. I made a chart, a list of all the different PKD robot stories for an upcoming talk I'm giving. And one thing you'll notice on there is I gave dates for all those books, but if you look carefully, they are not the publication dates. They are the writing dates. They are the dates that Phil wrote the books, not when they came out. And we would only know that for the work of Lord Running Clam, who compiled all that stuff. I know you got it from other sources, but you're the one that put it in a very easy, digestible place. So my other host today is Keith Giles, who Keith is the actual editor of this book. He's the publisher of this book. And for that reason, he is a good person to have to talk under the hood of this book. Also, he does a whole bunch of podcasts and he's used to like talking on the computer. So, Keith, you can tell people who you are and what you do if they're not already familiar.
Yeah. Well, in my normal life, I am an author as well, though mostly what I write and publish is nonfiction theology books and about mysticism and things like that. I'm also, as David mentioned, I do a couple of podcasts. I do one called Heretic Happy Hour. I have another solo podcast called Second Cup with Keith, and I am the co-owner of Choir Publishing. We published David Agranoff's book, People's Park, last year. We also did a collection of short stories from Philip K. Dick, and actually volume 3, which will be coming out maybe next year. David, you wrote the foreword to that. And very, very proud to have published this book, Great America and Dead World. We're going to jump into that, of course, just a little bit, but very, very proud to be associated with you, David, and with this book.
Well, thank you very much. And this is one that you and I talked about before when it was just a gleam in my eye.
Mm-hmm.
Walking on the beach in San Diego. I hadn't started this book, but I did tell you that I wanted to write it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have a long history on this book.
Yeah.
I'm stoked to actually talk about this one. And LRC wrote a very detailed, very long review that I put up on my blog that he sent to me. So we'll get into everybody's thoughts on things. And Keith, at this point, you're in charge.
Oh boy, okay.
We're gonna talk about Great America and Dead World. So
yeah, all right, let's do it. Well, so listen, thank you. I'm happy to at least temporarily be the co-host of your
Postcards
podcast.
from a Dying World.
Postcards from a Dying World. Yeah, so David, I guess I'll start by asking you, give us some background on the idea behind this book, because it is a great science fiction book by itself, and we'll talk about the plot and all that kind of stuff, the ideas for it, but the inspiration for it, like what made you, where did the idea kind of behind it come from? I know it comes from a little bit of the research you were doing on unpublished PKD and some things you discovered there. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's one of the more fascinating things, especially to Philip K. Dick fans.
Yeah, so I have a book that's still kind of in progress. I'm on the third draft of it, called Unfinished PKD. And that is a nonfiction book about all the unfinished work that Philip K. Dick left behind. And I've been working on that since, I think, 2021.
Wow.
And the original inspiration for working on Unfinished came when I went to the Fullerton archive and started reading like the outlines and unfinished work of PKD. And one of the most important outlines to this process is one called Anti-Talent, which was an outline for a novel that eventually morphed into Ubik. And one of the things that's great about that outline is that Phil never intended for anyone else to read it. It wasn't written to sell a project, because sometimes you'll write an outline to sell a project, like Zapgun started that way. But Anti-Talent was just Phil trying to get the idea down because he was obviously already working on something else. We don't know the exact date. My guess is that it's sometime around 63 when he was living in Point Reyes. But it was years before he actually ended up writing Ubik. And he wanted to get the idea down, so he jotted off this 11-page, 17-page-ish outline for a novel called Anti-Talent. And one of the cool things in it is that he talks to himself in it. And he tells himself, like, don't do this because this is too much like this book. And you've already done this, or this is very similar to C.M. Kornbluth and Frederick Paul's The Space Merchants or whatever. And I got really interested in the process of how Phil was writing, because one of the things about like people that come to Phil, they come to Phil for different things. Like there's some people like you and Gabriel McKee, for example, who are very into the theology of PKD. And then there's, I think LRC and I are people that are very into the writer that is Philip K. Dick, right? And I don't give a shit about the Pink Beam stuff as much as some people.
Yeah.
I just don't. It's not as interesting to me. That's not to say that it's a bad thing. It's just I'm very interested in the guy who wrote the novels, right?
Right.
And along the way, in 1964-ish, sometime after 64, 65, after his divorce from Anne, he another young science fiction writer from the Bay Area named Ron Goulart asked Phil for advice on writing his first novel. And Phil gave him this really cryptic response about how his phone's bugged, he doesn't want to talk on the phone. And then Ron invited him for coffee, and he said, no, my car only goes to my psychiatrist's office, which is, which, as Ron said, is a very Phil Dick kind of auto, right?
Yeah.
And he said, I'm more comfortable writing a letter. And the interesting thing about the letter is it doesn't say, Dear Ron. It doesn't say any of that. And for the first time ever in 1965, Phil Dick sat down and he had a formula, but it was very intuitive. And before that and after that, he never wrote down the formula. So one time in his life, he typed out this formula.
So actually, we should be very thankful that Phil didn't feel comfortable just talking about it over the phone.
Right.
We would never have this.
You'd never know. This novel wouldn't exist.
That's right.
And so he wrote this letter to Ron Goulart, which we knew about because it was mentioned in the Sutton biography, Divine Invasions. Like Sutton read it, but didn't think it was that big a deal. Like he mentioned it.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's a big deal. Whereas Sutton and Greg Rickman and all these other biographers, they knew that it existed, but they didn't think it was that big a deal.
Wow.
But around a couple years ago, when Ron passed away, when he was dying, he started selling off all of his letters and collectibles, and he sold the letter to Randall Radin, who's a really cool collector, and often correcting me on my posts on Facebook whenever I say something wrong. But Randall got a copy of the letter, and because he bought it from Ron, and therefore we got it. And so this is a very long version but people are here for a long discussion. So, but what ended up happening is that when I was writing Unfinished PKD, I did a whole chapter on how to write a Philip K. Dick, or how Philip K. Dick wrote a novel.
Right.
And one thing everybody should know is that he did things differently all the time. Like Man in the High Castles from the seat of his pants. Ubik is very heavily outlined, whereas he goes off the outline, right? But there's entire scenes of Ubik that are word for word in the outline. So so to say that it's not outlined is not entirely true. And so there are certain novels that where he did outline, and there's some that he wrote from the seat of his pants. He was not, there's a lot of writers who are religiously seat of the pants writers, like Stephen King.
Stephen King, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why many of his novels meander, and
Because he doesn't know where he's going yet. He's trying
Yeah,
to figure it out.
yeah.
Yeah.
he doesn't know how to end some of those novels, and
Yeah.
it's very
That's why they're
obvious.
800 pages. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
And Phil was sometimes a pantser, and sometimes he wrote from an outline, and the formula was mostly intuitive. But when he sat down and wrote it out, my question was, well, how much does this hold up? And
Right.
so I went to my shelf here of PKD books, and I pulled out 30 of them. There's a picture of me holding like all 30 of them in a unsolicited dick pic, but and it's me holding the 30 books. And I spent a whole weekend, a long weekend. I had a 3-day weekend from work, and I spent that whole weekend, and I made a chart, and it had like 4 items that I was looking for based on what he laid out in the formula. And I filled out that chart with 30 of the books.
Wow.
And what I did was I looked at, how does 3 Stigmata follow the formula? How does Ubik follow the formula? How does Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Now, there's a couple of them that I'll look at it and say, well, I didn't follow the formula at all in this one.
Right.
There's only a couple of those. I think one of the ones that really doesn't follow the formula a lot is like Dr. Blood Money, for example, is one that doesn't really follow the formula.
Okay.
But some of them follow it pretty damn close. And I
Yeah.
really think the one where he started kind of intuitively following the formula was The World Jones Made, is the one where it kind of started to form. Yes, LRC.
Can I jump in, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you did your research, did you keep records of your approach? In other words, did you approach it in a scientific matter of how you analyze these novels?
Oh yeah.
Because that's what I'm interested in. Because as you know, your work's going to be checked. Whatever you do, we have to see where it came from. And I would really be interested in reading in the details of your comparisons to the formula of these individual novels. I mean, that's a big project, obviously, but it would be interesting to discuss
it exists. Now, I kind of formed it into part of the chapter of Unfinished PKD. So I kind of roughed it in, but I have a document that where what I did was I just copied that same chart, right? And the chart is in the back of Great America and Dead World. And the chart is as follows. It has who are the 2 persons, what are the 3 levels, individual sized fuse point. And those are like the 5 things that, and what I did was I took all 30 books that I did this by, and I filled out the 30 novels, like what are the 2 persons, who's the subhuman, who's the protagonist, as Phil wrote it in the letter. And I just went through each book and filled that out. And then, so the reason why this all started is because, I just wanted to do kind of my research as to how he wrote a book. And then once I filled it out for 30 books, I started seeing the formula everywhere, to the point that my co-host on Dickheads, Langhorne J. Tweed, would be like, fuck, enough with the formula, because I would always be like, well, that's because of the formula, and you did this and did that.
Well, David, it could be a case of you just bought a brand new Bentley automobile, and all you see is Bentleys all over the place,
Yes.
Yeah, it could be like that.
It is. And so I started seeing the formula everywhere. I became like a beautiful mind, where I was seeing the formula every time I read PKD. And look, he switches it, he flips it sometimes, like Ubik, for example. So according to the formula and the way he writes about it in the letter, is you always introduce the subhuman character in the first chapter, and then you introduce the protagonist in the second chapter. Well, in Ubik, he flipped it, right? So it's not that he does the formula like it's intuitive. It's not like he was following the formula like I did.
Not rigidly, yeah.
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 But what he did is that he had this in his mind. This is how you write a book. This is how
Yeah.
you get, as he put it, how you get 55,000 words out of the Royal, was his Royal typewriter.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I did all this research. I wrote this chapter on Unfinished, and we were setting up to do an episode of Dickheads, and Professor Wilson and I were talking, and we were just chatting about like all this stuff I learned about the formula. And he kind of jokingly said to me, well, what good is like learning the formula if you don't use it?
Right.
Right. And like, I was thinking about that as I was walking my dog later that day. And I was like, well, he's right. Well, what use is learning about the formula if I don't actually like write a novel using the formula? And then I got more to thinking about it, and then I thought my favorite era of PKD is definitely the Point Reyes, like end of the marriage with Anne, like into like when he moved back to Oakland and all that, like that 63 or like 62 through 63.
Yeah. So what novels are those?
So we're talking Man in the High Castle and Time Slip's the first novel he wrote in the Hovel, right? And then through Three Stigmata and like Crack in Space and all that. Like, I mean, Crack in Space is not a very good novel, but
Yeah.
but that whole era is my favorite era. I think you're talking Man in the High Castle, Martian Time Slip, Three Stigmata, and Dr. Blood Money are like absolute bangers. Like those are like some of his absolute masterpieces.
So like 62 to 65, basically.
Yes, right. And then I mean, he wrote bangers after that, obviously. I mean, Android's Dream and Ubik came after that, although I'm not as big of a fan of Ubik as
I am.
Yes, as you are.
But I am too.
I love Ubik.
I love Ubik.
I love it.
I love Ubik, but it's not top tier for me.
Okay.
And Maze of Death is another one that comes right out of that.
That one's good.
I'm a huge fan of. And
yeah.
But that era where he was at the end of Point Reyes is important to me. And so what I kind of imagined in my head, and I've just had the experience of doing the Hovel walk in the real world a couple weeks ago, where I was in Point Reyes and did the walk. But I kind of, how this novel in my head, I pictured it was, I pictured Phil walking out of Anne's house and walking to the Hovel, but instead of arriving at the Hovel, he's in 2023 suddenly, and he spends 6 months in our world, and he sees MAGA and climate change and the internet, and then goes back to the Hovel and then writes a novel about his experience. So my imagination was picturing Phil spending 6 months in 2023 and then going back to the Hovel and writing a novel inspired by our world.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to method act as Phil. And I knew there was hubris involved in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I knew there was massive hubris in this. I'm not as good of a writer as Philip K. Dick. I'm dyslexic. I don't have the wordplay. I could never write a Philip K. Dick novel. But what I wanted to do was take the immersion that I had from doing Unfinished PKD and doing the podcast for all those years and write what I thought was as close as possible to what Phil would write about that era. And so when we were walking on the beach, Keith, my idea was to say, I want to write a novel using the formula, and I want to method act as Phil, and I want to try and write what I think Phil would write a novel about the modern world. And and I knew, just like, and I actually love when sometimes people like get like, they're like, oh no, he's going to be offended. I love when people call bullshit on things. When I taught the formula in David Gill's class,
right,
the week before I spoke, Gill was saying, hey, next week David Agranoff's going to come on and talk about the Philip K. Dick formula. And Tim Powers, who Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, is fucking dedicated to the guy.
Yeah.
Tim Powers was good friends with Phil, and a World Fantasy Award winning author himself.
Yeah.
His reaction.
Have you read?
His reaction was to say, Philip K. Dick formula, that's bullshit. Called my talk the next week bullshit. And my reaction was, it was funny because a lot of people were like, like thinking I was going to get all offended. My reaction was, that's awesome. That's so awesome that he called it bullshit. And I was like, well, Mr. Powers, come back next week.
And you'll see, see if you still
he had
think
no
it's bullshit.
idea that Phil wrote a letter to Ron Goulart. He didn't know.
Yeah.
He had no concept of it. And so, and the Great American Dead World version of it, when I was just starting to write this, I posted a thing on Facebook saying, like, this is the experiment, this is what I'm going to do. And my good friend, local writer, a fucking genius writer, Cody Goodfellow, who just released an amazing science fiction novel called New Tomorrow that I highly recommend. But Cody's first reaction was, who the fuck are you to write this?
Right.
And when he said, who the fuck are you to write this? I said, well, I'll tell you who the fuck I am. I'm the guy who just spent 6 years immersing himself in this stuff. And will I succeed? I don't know. I have yet to be able to hand a copy to Cody. But one of the people that, when I sat down to write this, that there were certain faces I saw and certain people I pictured reading this book and knowing I had to win them over.
Right.
And one of them was Cody, but another one was Lord Running Clam. Because
that's right.
Well, I thought of you often, LRC, when I was writing this, because I thought, if I can't convince this guy, then I haven't succeeded, right? And for that's one of the reasons why your review of this was so important to me, LRC, because I was like, this guy has read and has engulfed himself so much in PKD that I can't even begin to imagine, your head.
Let me say one thing, David. When I read Your Great America in Dead World, one thing Philip K. Dick that really stuck out to me was how you just sort of blew through everything. You didn't worry about, you didn't concern yourself with the mechanics behind the food oil supply or any of that stuff. You took it all as on a higher level sort of, and just expected the reader to pick up on all this stuff that you sort of, like Philip K. Dick did, just sort of just let fall by the wayside, but it's in pursuit of your story, which and I wrote in my review. I very rarely read a book straight through these days, but I did read your book straight through, and I couldn't put it down because it was such a fun read. And I loved all the different character names, and you can reference to Philip K. Dick, and it was kind of crazy in a Philip Dickian way, and it fell apart in Phil Dickian ways. It was like Phil moved to 2023 and just dashed off this 1964 novel. It was a lot of fun. It's a fun book.
Yeah.
Well, and we'll talk about how it fell apart a little bit later when we get more into spoilers. But because Keith and I had really interesting discussions about the way it ended.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
but I appreciate that, because the world building and doing world building Philip K. Dick style is an important part of the sauce, right?
Yeah.
Because I world build very differently than Philip K. Dick, although I'm inspired by his world building. But
Yeah.
this wasn't a David Agranoff novel in my head, right?
Yeah.
So I was trying to write outside of my comfort zone and to not write the way that I do. Now, I outlined it very heavily, and the way I did this and came up with the ideas for it, part of it, was to sit down and think about the formula and say, okay, I'm Philip K. Dick. I'm looking at 2023. I'm looking at this world, and so according to the formula, I have to have a subhuman character in the first chapter. And I have to have a protagonist character in the second chapter. So then I started thinking about, well, what's the story, right? Well, how would Phil comment on this? So then I started asking the questions, like what is real? What is human? Like, how do I ask the question, what is real? What is human in a 2023 way? And so then immediately I was like, well, I wanted to investigate the idea of simulated reality and this idea of people being able to choose their silos. And the most important thing for me to write about, and Phil writing about in this era, was the silos. And what I mean by the silos is one of the underlying themes of Great America and Dead World is that in our modern America, the right and the left have their own visions of reality. And
Right.
unfortunately, we have to live in the same world, but we see completely different worlds.
Right.
And so when I sat down to write this novel, I was like, how do I make a point about these two visions of reality? And I was thinking about Eye in the Sky a little bit, because in Eye in the Sky, the whole point of it is that Phil was trying to make a point about what it means to live in other people's perceptions. I already played with that in People's Park a little bit. In my novel People's Park. So I didn't want to go directly there, but what I wanted to do was, make a point about the right left thing. And that's when I came up with this idea of that the rich and powerful would get their version of reality in this simulation, and that the poor and underclass would have to deal with the consequences of climate change and these things.
Yeah.
Because that's honestly what we're heading towards. I mean, and you look at it in just the news in the last couple of days, a guy shoots up the CDC and shoots 600 bullets into the CDC building.
Yep.
2 lawmakers in Minnesota get gunned down for being Democrats. But the Trump administration is taking over the entire city of DC because a dude threw a fucking sandwich at a brown shirt.
Yeah.
At an ice office.
It's not illegal. You can throw rotten vegetables at these guys, can't you?
Right.
Well, thankfully, the judge agreed with you and threw out the case against the sandwich thrower, who, by the way, I guess used to be a DOJ employee.
That's what's so crazy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, these two perceptions of reality, unfortunately, are becoming more real as it was. So the whole thing with President Supreme and all that, I worried that the President Supreme thing was a little more on the nose than Phil would have done.
Well, what I liked is that you managed to do the whole thing without saying Trump, and even when this President Supreme character is talking, you didn't it wasn't super obvious. Like, he doesn't talk or write exactly the way Trump does. Like, so it was a little bit like, I mean, I don't think anybody would read it and not get it
from the first draft. Trust me, because the first draft he did sound a lot more Trumpy.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I would like to read that. That would have been fun.
Well, and there were times where I asserted myself as the writer.
Yeah.
And then there were times where I thought Phil wouldn't write that, and I cut stuff. There are two times where there are exactly 2 times in the novel where I wrote something that I thought Phil would never write that, but I'm going to put it in there anyways. And I can point to exactly what those things are. And it's funny because one of them, a friend of mine.
Do you want to spoil those? Do you want to tell us what those are?
Yeah, I will, because they're not big spoilers.
Okay.
But my buddy Desmond Reddick, who's one of my most trusted readers, I usually send him everything as soon as it's done. But Des, I didn't send him this one because he's not a PKD guy. And but he read Great America, and he highlighted the first one. He sent me a message on Facebook when he read the first one. And there's a character who refers to another character as the asshole's idea of a fuck face. And I did not think that was very Phil Dickian, but I loved it so much. I left it in there.
Yeah.
And then the other one is there's a scene where a character is inside a simulation and is in a simulated club, and they play a song called "The Hood Goes Crazy." Which is a song I had heard at basketball that day. Somebody was playing music at basketball, and the song "The Hood Goes Crazy" came on, and I just started writing, and I just put the Hood Goes Crazy in there, and I thought, Phil would never know the song "The Hood Goes Crazy."
Of course not. No.
But for me, it fit in that moment that it put me in the scene, and I decided to go with that. Now,
well, let me jump in again, David.
Yeah.
I was when I read Great America in Dead World, it seems to me from the very start it was like how to write a novel that falls apart in 3 days. You could see that the society is barely viable in any sense at all, but you make it work.
Right.
And you got the Janie's.
I love that,
taking care of the rich people in their AI world, and it's all just sort of. There's no way this can sustain itself to be a good ending. You know what I mean? It's gonna. Even if everybody goes to Great Heaven or New World Plus or whatever, the Heaven World, okay?
Yeah, Heaven Plus. Yeah.
Well, crikey, reminded that somebody still has to clean up their crap. I mean,
that's right.
They've got their heads
well,
in
actually,
boxes.
no. In Heaven, you're uploading your mind in Heaven Plus.
That's
Right,
just your brain.
body.
Yeah.
Your brain's in a box, right?
Yeah.
Your brain's in a box, so it's.
Well, someone's got to keep the data center running.
That's true.
That's right. Somebody's got to pour the nutrients in this damn box. I mean, you can set it up automatically, but eventually it's all going to fall apart, which I believe is what you intended when you wrote it. That this is a story that's falling apart as I write it.
Yeah. Well,
in that
I mean, obviously, I wanted, and this is kind of a spoiler, but not really. I mean, I see the MAGA world is unsustainable already.
Right. Yes.
And so I wanted to explore the idea that it was unsustainable. And in this future, and one of the things that, and these are both things that I think are very PKD, they're not necessarily the way, if I was writing this novel as a David Agranoff novel, first of all, the people who take care of the people who live on in the simulations are called Jannies. I would never in a million years name them Jannies.
Right. But you knew Phil would probably do something like that.
Phil would absolutely name them Jannies, and because it's short for janitor or janitorial or whatever.
I never made that connection. I just thought it was Janie because it was always young girls doing the job. I didn't make the connection that it was janitor. I thought Janie is a girl,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so the idea that they were called Jannies was because Phil would call them that. And then at the same time, like, okay, so they can't produce food in this future. There's only 2 crops that can grow in this climate change future. And so they turn it into this stuff called foodle. And foodle to me was such a Dickian concept. It's just a throwaway thing that you would just mention, and then you'd make all these jokes out of foodle. Because the way Phil does things is like he'd introduce something like that, and then there would be little tiny world building jokes throughout the book. And so they're the foodle tubes.
Yes.
And I know Nikita, who teaches Russian science fiction, who's a friend of Keith and I's, like, he mentioned to me that he found the body horror of the setup of the simulation to be, that was one thing that I wasn't sure was, at first I wasn't sure if that was very Phil Dickian or if that was more David Cronenberg.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
But I think Phil would have written, but I really do believe Phil in this writing about our modern world would find some way to physically make it gross. I mean, because it would be. And so the idea that they're sticking these tubes up people's asses and they're shitting in the tubes, and then the Jannies have to
someone has to clean it. Yeah,
they have to clean it, and they have to do that. I'm particularly a fan of when the DC characters come out of their food. There's like a whole scene where he's having to look at his wife, and he's like, ugh, because he's seeing the version where the guy's like holding the tube. Yeah, and he's like training like her shit out. Yeah, and it's like one of the grossest things. Yeah, and he's like, oh man, I wish I, because he was just in the simulation looking at this. She was beautiful. Everything's version. Beautiful. Yeah, yeah, and so that was all things that were very PKD. And then, but I'll tell you the moment, and I know Keith and I have talked about this before, and I don't know, I think I've told you this story, LRC, but the moment for me when it most crystallized that, you know, there's that joke that, I don't know who does the pop song, that Jesus Take the Wheel, but yeah, I don't know, but there was a PKD Take the Wheel moment for me. There were several of those where I was writing, and the way I write is that whenever I sit down to work on fiction or a novel, I take yesterday's work and I edit it first to warm up. Oh, nice. But I always do. I do. And there was one day where I was warming up and I was editing the day before his work, and I got to the part where Kai is having a conversation with the guy that she's supporting who's not into the technology, and she's using predictive text to respond to his comments, and he says, don't use your conveyed, right? And the idea that the predictive text was called conveyed, conversational aids. Yeah, right. Yeah, that was so PKD. But on top of that, when I came up with conveyed, I was very specifically like, okay, what's it going to be called in a Phil Dick way? And I thought of it consciously. So I knew that conveyed was there. But when I was editing and I got to the part where she was controlling the conveyed and that the controller was called a gang lion, I would never in a million years call an internet controller a gang lion. But you know who would? Yeah, Philip K. Dick would. Yeah. And I had completely forgotten that I wrote gang lion as the controller. And when I read it, editing it, I laughed out loud because it was so PKD, and I didn't remember writing it from the day before. I just didn't. It just came and went, and there was like a PKD take the wheel kind of moment where I don't know. I don't know where it came from. And if you look in the back of Great American Dead World, there's I put a glossary of terms, and some of them were actual terms that came from novels, like pizzled came from Ubik, for example. I used kibble, yeah, of course, con apps, but then like some of them were mine, like Hotbox and Gogs and Gang Lion, and Encephaloscan came from PKD. Encephala Traffic I made up to sound like it. Cephalochromoscope is one that came from, I think, Scanner Darkly. So you can look through here and see that there's some that were, that's part of the fun of it, is to figure out which ones I made up and which ones Phil made up. Yeah. Well, I just want to kind of say something about that, because to me, I think for anybody who is a fan of Philip K. Dick,
who picks up this novel, I mean, I think that's my biggest recommendation. If you're a big fan of Philip K. Dick's, you've got to read this book because it's so rewarding in the sense that you do pick up these terms, and some of them you're going to recognize, like, okay, like conapt or things like that, or kibble, like, okay, yeah, I've heard that before. But then all like these new sort of Philip K. Dickisms or whatever, Dickisms,
Mhm.
that are like, again, like it. If you really like Philip K. Dick, I think we all as fans have wondered, like, hey, if he had not died so young, if he had lived a little longer, if he could have lived to see the internet, if he could have lived to see, MAGA and what's going on in the world right now, or just smartphones and social media and that kind of thing, like, what would Phil have said about it? And I think your book, I'm sure you had a lot of fun because you kind of got to answer that question. You got to kind of pretend that you were Philip K. Dick and give us an example of, like, well, this is probably how Phil would have written about that. And it's just a lot of fun. It's very rewarding, I
Yeah,
think.
and it is. And then there's a nerd level too that
Yeah.
only a few of us are going to get certain things. Like I used kibble,
Yeah. Yeah.
kibble, but I used it differently than Phil did.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
reason I used it differently was on purpose because he would sometimes use terms and slightly like the black box is Mercerism is a little different
Right.
than it is in Do Androids Dream, right?
That's right.
It's not exactly the same.
Right.
And Talbot Yancey is a little different in the mold of Yancey versus the penultimate truth.
Yeah.
And so I thought, some of these terms I'm going to use them, but I'm going to use them a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And by the way, I resisted using Conap actually at first. And I think, Keith, you were the one that talked me into going back and
Yeah.
actually use, because I wasn't going to use Conap because I thought that was going too far. And then I think you actually talked me into putting it back in.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean, I think because, again, to me, a phrase like conapt, I mean, it almost tricks my brain into thinking I am reading a Philip K. Dick novel.
Yeah. Hey, I'd like to say, David, that when I read it, and in my review, I'd mentioned that it kind of reminded me of like a prelude to William Gibson's Neuromancer. And I would
which
like
is
to
funny because
expand. I'd
I'm
like
not a
to.
huge William Gibson fan, to be honest with
Well,
you.
I haven't read the book in years. It just struck me that way, and I'll tell you why. Because Gibson wrote Neuromancer, I believe, in 79, 80. So we're talking 1980s computer technology, which is what he built his Spore and his novel. Okay, well, here we are in 2023, and you're building your novel basically on 2023 artificial intelligence technology and projecting that into the future. But my point is that this technology that you project on artificial intelligence is a necessary prelude so that Gibson could build his Neuromancer world. In other words, you have to have the Janies, you have to have all this thing to enable the fact that these people can live in an immersive online world, which is what the sprawl is. And in your book, your online world it's the same thing. I'm kind of losing my thread here, but do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. It's funny because I'm not a huge Gibson fan, as I find his writing a little impenetrable. But
Wait, no, man, it's good.
well,
Neuromancer's great. Yeah, I think
no, I
his
mean I
later
like
stuff,
Neuromancer, and
his later stuff, like Pattern Recognition, I really love, but his style is very, you have to kind of get into the rhythm of what he's doing. Like even his more recent novels, that to me is like, I think I started to read The Peripheral and it almost felt like I was reading some kind of code. Like, is this English? Like, it was
yeah.
really difficult.
Well, and one thing should be noted about the way I wrote about technology is that, and you kind of brought it up, Keith, with this idea of like, well, what would Phil be writing if he had lived
Yeah.
further?
Yeah.
And I kind of, well, first of all, people get lots of, lots of, lots of, um, we, I'm sorry, I just got a text that distracted me.
It's
But
okay.
so people get lots of wrong ideas about where Phil was going because his last book that he wrote was not science fiction.
Right.
And so a lot of people
Transmigration.
get this idea that he was
Yeah.
going to not continue to write science fiction, although he was planning a science fiction novel when he died. And but the thing about the last science fiction novel he wrote was Divine Invasions, and he made no attempt to make Divine Invasions feel modern. Like Divine Invasions could have been written in the 60s. Like
Yeah.
the science fiction, like Phil had zero fucks to give about trying to make it modern science
Cutting
fiction.
edge technology. Yeah.
Cutting edge technology. And
Yeah.
so with Great America and Dead World, I wanted to be like, okay, he saw the technology for 6 months under my thought experiment. So he knows that it exists, but there are a certain degree that and this gets to what you said, LRC, about how I didn't waste a lot of time with, I knew Phil wouldn't write about the details on how the computers worked, or
but it had to underline your knowledge. You brought this current knowledge to the AI technology as described in your book, and it developed. So you were doing essentially a science fiction job of extrapolating into the future.
Sure.
And this is science fiction, and this is what makes
Right.
it kind of fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think Phil would have understood video games in quite the way that
No.
I wrote about them, or like, so there's a little bit, I'm giving myself license on that. But at the same time, I'm also factoring in, I thought about that a lot, because I thought, well, if he spent 6 months here, he had a chance to talk to people and to be like, what the hell are you doing in that video game? Or like, like, what are people doing? And so I wanted an understand, but Kai had to be able to understand it, because Kai had to operate in it. So
Yeah.
it had to happen a little bit. So in the end, I mean, the experiment can only go so far. I'm going to eventually write the novel that I think, well, first of all, every author should be writing the novel that they want to write, you know?
Well, doesn't inspiration strike you when you write a novel? It's not something you just say, gotta write a novel and think it out. Don't you get inspired?
Well, yeah, I mean, the inspiration came pretty much that day that Professor Wilson said to me, like, well, what use is learning the formula if you don't use it? And
oh, I see. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So can I ask?
A lot of the story beats came from the process of I outlined it using the same thing that I used to chart the formula, right?
Yeah.
And so, and in the back of the book, in the article about how this novel was written, I explain exactly how you can see how the story formed from the formula, right? From saying,
so the story, the origin of the story, like in other words, David, you would never, I'm guessing, you would never have sat down as David Agranoff to say, my next science fiction novel is going to be about President Trump in the future and simulation pods, and like, you would probably never have written that novel, right?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Without the formula and without the whole formula discussion and trying to do a PKD thing.
Yeah.
I mean, my last novel before this was about a vampire killing Nazis in World War II.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly on the same. Well, no, the last novel before this was People's Park, so that was very PKD.
Yeah, so this book that you were saying at the beginning, like, this is not a David Agranoff novel in the sense, like, because this book has a lot of psychology and philosophy, and politics.
There's a whole plot point of this novel that hinges on a philosophy professor making a joke about Heidegger and his simulated wife not getting it.
Yeah.
That is something that Philip K. Dick would do, but
he would totally.
nothing I would ever write in a novel. I write novels about vampires killing Nazis, and
what Keith just said. What Keith just said is another reason why I read this as it being a very Phil Dickian novel.
Yeah.
It really was. It read like a Phil Dick novel, sort of weird off kilter sort of Philip Dick novel, but it had the same characteristics of a Philip Dick novel. As we've talked about the beginning, and now we're talking about the end, and it's in this typical Philip K. Dick fashion. I felt you kind of cut it off a bit abruptly, because I would personally like to see in about 50 more pages on how the Supreme President's empire was falling apart in
Yeah,
detail.
let's see it actually
Now,
crash and
how
burn,
many
right?
times?
Yeah.
Now,
That would
Lord
be,
Running
but
Clam,
it's
how
all
many
it's all
times?
implied, you know.
Yeah.
Lord Running Clam, how many times did you read a Philip K. Dick novel where you were unsatisfied with the ending, where you thought it went that it had a weird coda, or it didn't quite?
Oh, I'm trying. I can't think. There's one novel I can't think of it is where it just seemed to come to an abrupt end. Your novel didn't come to an abrupt end, but it certainly left that the whole obvious feel good reading candy that you could have stuck in there about bashing the President Supreme.
Yeah.
Not to mention Donald fucking Trump. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that would have been a lot of fun.
And look, at this point, if you made it this far, we're probably going to spoil the ending here.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, we'll move into some spoilers now. Okay.
Yeah, well, let's
I'm
get
not
into
trying
spoilers.
to.
But before we get into spoilers, if you this is the experiment of Great American Dead World, and I believe in this book. I'm very proud of this book. I really hope people buy it. And if you have, I know this sounds really, if you got a friend who's into Philip K. Dick, you know, buy it
recommend
for a friend.
I mean, I'll say it. Please do.
Yeah.
Yes, recommend it. They'll love it.
Yeah,
I think it should be a bestseller. It should be a bestseller, Dave. I don't know how your distribution is, but it certainly should be a well-read
well,
book.
you know, we're if this is an indie book, so you know everything's on us to promote it, and so and so on that regard, if you're out there listening, like, we need all the help we can get to promote this book, and so, you know.
So that means if you buy it, yes, and read it, yes, and if you love it, recommend it to a friend, yes, and rate it and review it, and because those ratings and reviews matter. All of that stuff is very, very helpful.
And if you buy a copy, look closely.
The physical copy, yes.
A physical copy, because it
has backwards.
It has
it's
subliminal
upside down.
That's kind of on purpose, actually.
It has.
I wonder who designed. Did you design that, Keith?
I didn't design it, but I did. David and I worked on the image of the flag with the gold stripes.
Yeah, and obviously I wanted the gold stripes because that idiot in office.
He puts gold in everything.
Look at his ballroom that he wants.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean that was part of the thing about. Okay, well, we can get into spoilers now.
Okay. Well, if we're gonna get into spoilers, can we talk about something that you and I went back and forth on? So I guess I was one of the first people who got to read this book because I was editing it, and I was very excited about that. I loved it immediately when I read it the first time and went back and then started to edit it. But there were a couple of things that I pushed back on with David, and some things just as I had some questions about things, and one was a question about why you didn't include, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, but I had a bit of a question about why in the novel, in the world that you've created in the novel, like I guess because I wanted to believe that if it ever got this bad, that there would be some kind of a resistance group. You know what I mean? There would be some revolutionaries, there'd be some troublemakers, there'd be some holdouts, some people that were like, no, we're not going to go down easy. We're not going to let this President Supreme have his way. And so I'd asked you about that. Like, why aren't there any?
There was one. What about Nick? Nick was one of those guys, surely, Keith. Nick, the old boy who didn't want to go into the heaven sin at the end. But
a bit. Yeah, a bit. But he's not very vocal, right? He's sort of quietly, he doesn't like it, and he's not a fan.
Well, there is a response.
Okay.
There's a couple things. One, it's somewhat inspired by Man in the High Castle and the idea that
there you go.
Yeah, Man in the High Castle, one of the things the TV show got wrong is that it's not about a resistance or people fighting back. It's about the quiet acceptance of fascism.
Right.
And that's
otherwise they'd given up. The people had given up in this novel, which is one reason why the inevitable coming to the end of this society is pretty much right there in the novel.
That's right.
People are moving on. They're moving online.
That's right.
And this is a huge spoiler. A huge spoiler for why. And it's so funny because I love these questions when I get these from editors. I had this on a short story that that's coming out in a space horror anthology where Eunice, who's the editor of that book, and we had a huge argument about the entire point of my story. Because and that story is called Sentenced in the Crucible, and it's about a prison on Mercury. And she really wanted at one point for the main character to be redeemed or have something good about him, and I was like, no. The entire point is you don't go to a prison on Mercury if you're a good person,
Right.
And I won't say anything more about that story, but I had a similar thing with you, Keith, on this, because when you were like pushing me on the resistance thing, and I was like, well, no, because it defeats kind of the whole purpose.
Yeah.
The whole point of the novel in the end is the siloing. It's about this world where people have accepted that this is the way it is. Unfortunately, there are people that have to be the victims of this world one way or another. Like the ruling class have chosen this, but there's people that have to suffer for it. In the sense, and we see this in the real world right now with where Trump wants to move all the homeless from Washington, D.C. He wants to just put them on buses and send them to us in California. And
in your novel, Dave, I seem to think one of the things that struck me was the people who are taking care of the people in the pods. The people in the pods are pretty much all old people, but the people who are taking care of them are the young people. So there's that dynamic of the old people that are sort of like in the way a little bit. And, you know, just get them all. You know what I'm saying? There's some sort of generational friction there within your plot.
Well, and I see that all the time now with the when you go to service workers or you have people who wait tables or work in restaurants, they're all younger. And right now we have this thing where like they don't know how to because young people don't know how to talk to people. So
because of the technology and stuff, right?
My wife, who was a server for many, many, many years, cannot stand how young people wait tables and do those things because they're terrible at it because they're not even good at making eye contact. And
they're just starting out.
And now there's a restaurant, a pizza place in our neighborhood that you have to log on to their website and do all from your phone. You have to do all the orders. And Carrie was like, "Fuck that! We're not eating here. We're getting out."
See that? Okay, this is an aside, but that's an annoyance as well because if you ever hear about we'll either see a sign for a new restaurant or someone will mention something or we'll be looking hey, let's try, this just happened yesterday. We were going to try a new pizza place nearby. And so I want to just go on their website and see their menu and their prices. And you cannot do that nowadays. You have to actually start an order. You have to begin the process of doing an online order for the food before they will show you their menu or tell you their prices. And it annoys the hell out of me. Why can't I just go to the website and see the menu? Just tell me what it is.
Well, where do you live at, Keith?
I'm in El Paso, Texas.
Oh, you're in El Paso. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's part of just. And
maybe it's only here, but I mean, I just had this problem where if you go to a restaurant's website, they will not just tell you their menu and their prices. To find that information, you have to start to do an online order, and then you can get the secret information.
Well, part of the whole thing of the technology and the to get back to the on track.
Thank you.
Thing, part of it is the acceptance of the system this is the way it is, but also the ending of the book when we discover that literally that there's been a dimensional split between
and that's an out of the blue, almost like Deus Ex Machina thing. Although when you pitched me the book, that was my favorite thing about this. When you pitched it to me, I think on the beach, I think you might have mentioned this or somewhere you mentioned that the only place where the two sides meet, these two realities meet, is in the floor of Congress or something. And I was like, oh, dude, that's genius. I love that.
Yeah, well, I originally wrote it as a short story, which, of course, what's more Dickian than taking a short story and
expanding it into a novel.
the end of a novel?
Yes.
And so I had written a short story where I tried to crack this idea that, the two realities only
Yeah.
met on the floor of Congress. And unfortunately, like, that's the last place where the two realities meet in our
That's
world
right. It's
today.
the last. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
so many,
almost,
so many different depths and things going on in this novel that make it a Philip K. Dick novel in a sense that you've got an awful lot going on, and you just sort of breeze right on through it. You know
well,
what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
so
and
Dick
I
in that
wanted,
sense.
and for us, a big problem in PKD novels that we keep coming into when we were doing the podcast was, and this is a huge thing for Langhorne and Anthony, that they would get mad, is they would say, oh, well, the novel should have ended here, and then there's 20 more pages.
Yeah.
And there's always 20 more pages. And they would always say that there's always 20 more pages.
Right.
And so one of the things I wanted to do with this novel was I wanted the reader to be like, oh, it should have ended there, but here's another 20 pages.
But here's the 20 pages of like, what is this?
Yeah. And so this whole thing with the Congress and all that was meant to be totally left field.
Yeah.
It's tied in enough because Kai is the one who goes to this other world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that part of it though. That's an interesting part of the novel to me. I really
Yeah.
like it.
And so for me, the idea was I wanted an ending that kind of felt like, what?
Uh-huh.
How did we get here? Because that happens so many times in Philip K. Dick novels.
Yeah.
Well, David,
Yeah.
I think you may have written more than you intended because you've written, in a sense, you've written a novel that totally encompasses the present day situation that we're all living here in the world, in America and here in the world. You've got it all in there.
Yeah.
All the problem.
From your lips to the zeitgeist ears, I would hope that.
Yes,
but
you caught the zeitgeist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just saw your Gubble shirt. That's awesome.
I love
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm making a lot of those points, but I think I don't know how much of it will go over people's heads or how much, I think promoting it, we're going to focus a lot on that it was written in the formula and that you're trying to do the formula.
Well, I don't know if I would stress the formula because then you're inviting criticism. Criticism can be refuted by showing your work, how you studied the novels, what you in other words, you did an experiment here, David.
I don't mind if people call bullshit because honestly, like that is, to me, that's like, well, if you think it's bullshit, give it a shot and tell me whether you think I'm right or wrong. And I'll accept that some people will think that I failed and that some people will not feel that I got there. But for me, the fact that you guys as Dickians got it is a huge deal to me. And then one of the first reviews that we got, there's a guy who does a blog up in Portland who did a review, and he called the questionable authorship of this book, and that cracked me up, and I loved it because when he said questionable authorship, it made me laugh, and I was like, thank you, because I questioned who wrote this book. From moment to moment when I was editing it, all the time there's, and I'm sure if I opened to any page, and look, there's certain things we haven't even gotten into, like the lone wolf reports and the
no, I love that stuff. I love the NRA app that lets you know when there's some a shooting nearby, and oh my gosh, that's awesome. That was genius.
The huge database of previous mass murders which they put in the game. I thought that was hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the game, you get to basically go to mass shootings and stop the guy.
Like the whole the video game that she's playing is historical mass shootings, and you go in and you try.
You get to be the good guy with the gun.
You get to be the good guy with the gun. Yeah. And
that's all insane.
Yeah.
So stupid.
And see, and here's the funny thing is,
but you step back a minute and look at what the fuck was going on here. It is amazingly hilarious in a sense. It's just like that, and there's all kinds of weird shit going on in there. And it's a fun book, David. I got to give you that.
Well, and I, again, the good guy with the gun stuff, again, was me looking at like mass shootings and things and being like, well, how would what would Phil say about it? Like, how would Phil comment on this? And
Yeah.
he that's not one of his predictions. That was a John Brunner prediction, but
Yeah.
John Brunner predicted mass shootings
Stand on Zanzibar.
Yeah.
in Zanzibar. That's right. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
and but you cannot comment on our modern world without commenting on mass shootings.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
And
Yeah.
so
And
that was another thing.
destruction.
The names, Mayerson, I think there's some other deep cuts on the name. Greenstone is a thumbnail to the formula itself, because
Right, I recognize that. I recognize that was in the formula.
yeah, and then as far as the double meaning of that, and then I think the not Runcible, but Runcible is one that's a big one, because it's Runcitor in
Right.
Ubik, but it was Runcible in the outline. And
Interesting.
so I had the characters named Runcible, and
Well, Runcible was in.
they were in one of the
another
books too. They were in the men whose teeth were all exactly
Oh,
alike.
there you go. Yeah.
Which is
okay.
my least favorite of the mainstream novels that I've read so
Yeah.
far. But,
Yeah.
but that was a reference to that, because I think I was just reading The Men Whose Teeth Were All Exactly Alike at the time. So there's reference. I mean, the fact that there's a reference to that novel.
Right. That's pretty deep cut.
That's pretty fucking deep cut. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you guys you're gonna have to go here in a minute. So I don't
Yeah.
know if you have any closing thoughts on
Well, I'll let Lord Running Clam give a final thought.
Well, I'll try and gather my thoughts here. I can only comment on the overall reaction of myself to the novel, and it was something that I just pretty much read straight through, which I always did with Philip K. Dick books. You just start them, and you just read until you finish, and I did the same thing with this. I enjoyed the main heroine, Kai. I thought she was a really good character.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a Frosty here. Frosty. Thank you, Patty. And I thought the plot was well done. There were a few minor criticisms. It needed some copy editing.
That's my fault.
Well, yeah, but that didn't detract from the novel, really.
Yeah.
I can only say I enjoyed it, and I can say it in Philip K. Dick terms. I enjoyed it because you could see it was a Philip K. Dick essay in a sense. You were trying to write like Philip K. Dick, and you succeeded in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I will not even qualify that. You succeeded, I would say, in that you did write a novel as if Philip K. Dick had written it in 2023, and it just reads very easily. It's everything a science fiction novel should be. It's a quick, exciting a thing that fires your mind up about all kinds of different thoughts going off in different directions, and you spin all these ideas off, just like Phil did. You spin all these ideas off, and you want to follow these ideas, but now you got to get back to reading the book and follow the plot down where it goes.
Yeah.
And it came to its inevitable conclusion. All right. I mean, it was inevitable pretty much from the first fucking paragraph that this book was going to go down the toilet. All right. Or the story was. Not the story is written, but the world of the
yeah, they were going to run out of food. There was just
that's right. They're running out of food.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and and we have to. I thought it was a nice touch. We had to rely on Canada to provide the food all to everybody.
Yes.
And of course the Canadians, they still don't like us and ain't giving us any food.
Right.
Yeah, there was some of the ways that I'm very proud of the scene where Greenstone has to go to Canada. And, like he talks to him and they're just like, sorry, dude.
Sorry, bud.
Yeah, we just you're not gonna get anything. Oh, and I will say one way you influenced the novel, LRC, is the pluggers and chasers, the ads that chase you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
you and I were talking about Unteleported Man, and there's something similar to that in
Yep.
Unteleported Man, and I remembered I thought that was such a genius concept that the ads chase you in the real world, and like that there's machines that do that. And that was one of my
little drones that follow you
little
around.
drones
And,
that follow you.
The predator balloons, right? The
Yes.
predator balloons are
It's
hovering
the
over your head
predator
and all that
balloons
shit.
and
You can't quite reach them.
yeah.
Well,
love
let's
it.
talk about some of the characters you come up. And now, to me, a key character in this book was Nick. You know, the old boy who doesn't want to leave the badass world he's living in and go
He
into
was
the heavens.
Cal State Fullerton philosophy
Yep.
professor.
Yeah.
That guy. And I thought he was a very important character because of this whole dynamic between the generations. You know, it mean I'm an older guy than you guys, and you know, you're all familiar with cell phones and this whole. You know, I wouldn't know how to order a fucking pizza online with a cell phone because I don't have one. All right, because I do not like them, but it's I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's the difference between my generation, which is now on its way out, and the upcoming generation, your generation, David,
Right.
and the people who are younger than you, I suppose, mostly because they live on these devices.
51, so.
But you obviously, you know, I mean, I started in the computers in 1980. That's 45 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when computers came out. It was in 1980, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and used them and went on from there. But now it's got to the point where it's just almost too much hassle to turn a computer on. You got AI wanting you to ask it questions, and then you type in a simple search thing. It wants to volunteer more information than you need, and then you go to a website. You got to click on something where you got to pay for, or you got to click on something and give away your life history. It's just like, who the fuck wants to deal with this? I don't.
Yes.
But we have to deal with it. And I thought that this is the generational thing I'm talking about between Kai and Nick was a really good dynamic in the novel. I thought that was good. And then you've got, was it Roger Greenstone, the congressman or no,
Yes.
the aide to the president supreme.
Yeah.
That guy's a complete asshole. And I know you wanted to play him that way.
Yeah.
But even
it's an asshole's idea of a fuckface, right?
What I like though is that about Greenstone is that even though he realizes, you know, he's on the other side, right? He's sort of on the he's on the right side of it, right? Meaning the conservative right.
Right.
And but he realizes it's all bullshit, and he knows he needs to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Right. So he's not like a true believer in anything.
Yeah, and then the conflict of the novel, the fuse point, as the formula would have said, is Nick, because he needs Nick to
go with them, or his wife
with
won't
them
go.
to brain box, and like he needs Kai to help him convince Nick to do that, and that's where the fuse point between the subhuman and the protag character come together.
Yeah,
the formula.
All right, that's good.
Yeah. And so that's why he is so important. But you know, I'm very proud of the moment where he is talking to the simulated version of his wife and then realizes that she can't hold a candle to his real life wife because he makes a joke about Heidegger being a Nazi, and she doesn't get it because
she didn't get it right.
Because the real life version of his wife would get that joke, but that data is not inputted into the simulation, so therefore the simulation.
Yeah. On the heaven simulation, the final where Roger wants to go, where they all want to go, this heaven sim, it's like, man, this is awful fucking sketchy.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, you really want to do this?
And once you're in there, you can't get out.
Once you get
exactly.
your body has been turned to mulch, and your brain's supposedly in a box. But and then the idea is like, you know, how much do you trust President Supreme that you're really going to be put in a simulation, or if they're just killing you? And then
exactly.
I had kind of gone more that way in the first draft with this idea that he was worried that he was going to be killed, but then I decided that that Roger and his people were going to have faith in President Supreme, whether it was justified or not, and that I really wanted to play with the idea of people that are giving up their bodies to like become like technologically alive. And
Right.
But
I thought that was
but I got the impression also, David, that once you're in this heaven sim, it's not really you, it's just another AI. Am I right?
well, that's the question.
Yeah.
I
Is it
don't
you or
know.
is it a copy of your, it's an AI? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is like, is in our minds right now, like, um, are we who we are, or are we something else? I mean, that's the Philip K. Dick question in a
That's
nutshell.
right.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what you're here for, Keith. You have to explain all that to us, right?
right.
Oh,
Well,
I don't
all
know.
right. Well, Keith, I know you got to go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I got to
But
run, guys. I'm sorry.
yeah, let's wrap this up.
all right.
And Keith, where can people find you?
Yeah, well, you can, my blog is, you can just go to keithgiles.com, and look up Heretic Happy Hour or Second Cup with Keith, wherever you listen to podcasts. My books are on Amazon. And there you
You
go.
run YouTube all over YouTube. I see you there all the time.
Yeah, I'm
That's
on
why I
YouTube as
mostly
well,
see what you
off and on.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Hey,
the
but Keith,
replicant
before you
report,
leave,
you talk sci-fi, right?
Yes. Yeah, I have a replicant report. I just kind of started that. It's like once a month. I'm going to do a little YouTube channel where I talk about science fiction. Yeah.
all right. Well, it's been a real pleasure to actually meet you face to face, and I hope to see you in San Diego next year for the Philip K. Dick Festival.
Fullerton.
Sorry,
Yes.
Fullerton. I see not the
That's
same
the
place.
plan. That's the plan. Yes, I
Fullerton,
hope to see you there.
Yeah,
all right,
don't
man.
miss
Thanks
that,
very much.
folks. Fullerton, August 20th through the 23rd, the 5th International Philip K. Dick Festival. We're giving the Paul Williams Lifetime Achievement Award for the first
No, no, no,
time
no,
ever.
no, no, no. August? Didn't you mean it's in June?
It's in August because it's the week before Worldcon. So
Hang on a second. Let me get this right. The Philip K. Dick Festival is in August.
it's in
I already
August
thought it
because
was
it's
in
1
June.
week before Worldcon in Orange County. So we're doing them back
All
because
right.
yeah,
All right, great. That's great. And about a year from now, then.
a
That's
year
right.
from
Yeah.
now,
We'll
and
see you in a year.
yeah, and then
Yeah, all
people
right,
can
Keith. Bye bye.
All right.
people can come to Orange County, and they can stay for both cons. The World Science Fiction Convention is 1 week after.
I'd like to do that. I'd like
Yeah.
to
Sounds
do
fun.
that.
All
I'm
right,
saving
so
up my money.
folks, this has been the return to Postcards from a Dying World, and we're really glad I'm really glad to have you guys here to talk about my book. A lot of good, thoughtful discussion, and hopefully people will pick it up. LRC, your book is Pink Beam, a Philip K. Dick literary chronology, and people can find it and Wide Books online, right?
Right. Or Amazon. It's all
Yeah.
Amazon, basically.
And on that note, we'll say goodbye. But folks, thank you for joining us. If you made it this far, you are a true dickhead. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.